I think we're living in this age now where people have strong literary backgrounds who can articulate complicated and nuanced ideas with words. People who write treatments for main titles or shows are going to be very powerful. People who have a strong sense of history, art history, music, philosophy, architecture, fashion, photography, can call upon these references with exacting detail to ask the agents, it's between this and this, but more like that. And the last ones who, when the machine kicks out all the work, can sit back and say, that's actually not good. Do it again and again. There. That's what the world wants. This is what the project needs. So I think, why are we in this place where we're going to bring ourselves to the frame of production where we can easily be in the world of direction and to be the visionary that you were meant to be?
Chris, this term work-life balance often comes up a lot in conversation. And I can honestly say I don't think throughout my entire career I've ever really achieved a true balance of the two. And I'd love to find out from you through our conversation if you honestly feel like this is even something that's achievable, especially being somebody who is creative. But before we get into that, your mission is to teach 1 billion people how to make a living doing something that they truly love. And I suppose my first question to you is, have you ever been caught in a situation where you're making a living but doing something that you don't really love yourself?
Yes. I was working at an ad agency called Cole & Weber in Seattle. And I got the opportunity to work there mostly because my friend Colleen Mathis had said, I need a partner. I need an art director. I'm a writer. I didn't think I was going to get the job, but they hired me. It's a great place if you want to do advertising, but I studied design. And I thought I could work really hard. I can make something. I was on the path of joining them full time and moving my life to Seattle. But I just kept feeling like, I don't know if I went to school to learn about type and push images and boundaries to then do centered layouts for ads and just make sure everything's super legible and crisp and clean. And so there was something that felt like not right for me.
Right. So now that you're in a position to teach at scale many people how to achieve financial success doing what they love, you must get a lot out of that.
Yes, for sure. Because I just think that if we look at our time here on Earth and how long humanity's been on Earth and how long Earth has been in existence, it's just a tiny little sliver of a sliver. And I just think to go to the end of your life and not to do something that gave you joy, that lit you up, I think that's a sad way to live. I don't know if that's living. I think you're busy dying at that point.
Yeah, I mean, conversations like this always bring me back to, it must have been about 8 years ago when we were in that parking lot talking about our careers and just debating what this is all about. And I remember specifically you telling me that you were wanting something new. And this must have been just around the time of the seeds of the idea of the future, which obviously you've become very successful doing now over the years. Was there anything, going back to that time that you felt you were lacking or something that you were searching for?
Yeah, I think after working in commercial advertising and music video production for over 2 decades, I think when I was younger, I was telling myself, hey, if this super cool project comes along or I get to work with that artist, it's going to make a difference. Everything's going to change. And then you get there and you're like, well, maybe it's the next one. And it's the next one. You keep doing that. 20 years later, it's like, I think I've done most of what I wanted to do. We get to work with amazing people and brands we love. But it's another day. It's just the grind. And I was thinking, if I'm working for that artistic chase, that high, or I'm working because I'm trying to save more money, I think it's diminishing returns on investment. But the thing I loved throughout this entire process was while I was running Blind, my production company, I was also teaching at Art Center and at Otis. And that gave me so much fulfillment, like spiritual, creative it's like soup for the soul. It's like, it felt really good. But the problem was I knew I couldn't do that sustainably and live the lifestyle that I had because, in America, we don't pay teachers well. So I was looking for the alternative to that. And I think eventually I found it.
Yeah. Did it take long for you to discover exactly what that path was meant to be?
It took a couple of tries. I can't say I tried that hard at the beginning because I thought, hey, I'm going to teach a workshop on typography. I'm going to just share what I learned from my professors at Art Center. And I tried to get a couple of people in it. And the price point was relatively high at that time, where I think I was asking for like $1,500. And I didn't realize something, that for the time in which I was making commercials and music videos, people started thinking of me as mostly a motion designer, art director, creative director type. And I think there was a disconnect between my public image and what I knew how to do. So the marketing of it wasn't great, and I didn't really try that hard. So after we had a handful of people enroll, I just canceled. I said, this is not it. That's as much as I tried before. But luck would have it that I would meet a former classmate. We would talk about creating a school, some kind of new education paradigm. And the best way forward for us to build that awareness that I didn't have was through content creation on YouTube specifically.
Right. And through consistency, one thing led to another, and here we are. But my question would be, now with everything that you do have going on, what would you say your relationship is with work and life?
Okay, great question. I think the way I would describe it before, there was work and there was life, and there was a lot of separation between these two worlds. I would go to work, I'd work really hard, go home 8, 9 o'clock at night. And then now I'm at home and I need to decompress. And it takes a toll on you. When you're working with managing creative people, that's stressful. And then when you're working with clients who can't express to you what they want and are changing their mind, or sometimes they're just downright nasty, it takes a while for that to kind of shake off your body. So I would sit in front of the TV, I would kind of veg out a little bit, binge watch something. And then there was like my life at home with my children and with my wife and the trips we would go on. Now it's very different because instead of having work-life balance, I have work-life integration where those two worlds come together. And I think that's a beautiful thing. It's a little messy on the edges, but in principle and the core, it's really cool. Like for a period of time, my youngest son, he traveled with me everywhere I went for about 1.5 years. So he went to work with me every single day. And if I were to go on a public speaking engagement, he would just travel with me. He was my travel buddy. We'd stay in the same hotel, so I just had to pay for his airfare. And it was awesome to experience. And it's something I would never trade in the world because that was a very special time for the two of us. And my wife would go sometimes too. And so we would do these things together. So I would talk somewhere a little bit and they got to see my world. And then we would spend time in Germany or in New York together or in the Philippines. And I thought that was really, really special.
Yeah, this work-life integration sentiment is actually a really beautiful aspiration that I think we should actually all try to achieve. And I've read about how you describe it in some of your previous posts before. And I've also read how you speak about burnout. You actually describe burnout through a few different pillars. You could be suffering from fatigue in your role or your current employment. You could be maybe not experiencing the right amount of growth or achieving the growth that you would expect of yourself in a job. You feel stuck, or any of the above. There's multiple reasons that factor into anyone feeling that they're burnt out at any given time. So my question for you is like, how do you then go and teach people, knowing all of this and how tricky it is? How do you teach people to try to achieve this work-life integration in their careers?
This is much harder in principle to apply than it is to understand. So the first part is just to understand that there's a new paradigm, a new frame to look at how we should exist as mature adults living in the world with certain responsibilities. I think the predominant narrative is work-life balance. So there's the thing that you do for yourself and at home, and there's things that you do at work. So sometimes when you're at work, you're thinking about home. And sometimes when you're at home, you're thinking about work and you're a person caught between two worlds. This happens to all of us. That's why somebody's like talking to you and they're saying, hey, Simon, like, are you here right now? Are you here with me, or are you thinking about something else? Because I may have your body, the physical presence of you, but your mind, your spirit, your energy is somewhere else. And that's not to cast judgment on you. It happens to all of us, especially if you have a lot of responsibilities. Now, the first thing that you need to do is you need to be clear about the path of what integration looks like to you. And when I try to do exercise with people, I ask them to start with a clean sheet and to create as many overlapping fields of interest and things that they're really good at and things the world pays you to do and what the world needs, and try to design a life. We're used to designing experiences, visual things, products, but we don't really design our life. And so you first need to get a clear picture of what that is, and you need to sit with that for a while, because if this is where you're going to put all your energy, it's good to know that the destination, once you arrive, is really where you want to be. That's step one, because I think the weird thing about the way the world works is you get what you look for. So if you're not looking for anything, you just get just about anything, and you won't even know if it's good. So if we search for something specific, all of a sudden in a book, in a conversation, or something that you see online somewhere, you're like, wow, maybe that's what I need to be doing right now. So now if we have a clear picture of where we want to be, a life that is an integration of all the things that we think give us joy, that give us meaning and purpose, and we do that, we need to find a partner now who's in on the same dream. And that's very difficult, because a lot of us will meet somebody when we're younger, when we are not thinking about these kinds of things. We form a relationship, we get married, and we have very different ideas about what the future looks like. So that's a whole thing in itself. So my whole thing is, if you could, you would know what it is that you want to do. You would find the perfect partner who wants to do this with you, and you would build this life together. And when I see people like the Hormozis, Alex and Layla Hormozi, they are almost the same person in two bodies. They want the same thing. All they do is think about work all the time. Now, to the outsider, to normies, it might look really unhealthy, but to them, this is the joy of their life. And I can see the kinds of things they can build together. And when I meet couples like that, you can pretty clearly see they're bought in on the shared dream. And you need that if you want to have the work-life integration.
You said something so important there. And it's the fact that as designers or creatives, we're so used to, on a daily basis, responding to briefs and designing our way out of them, or problem solving around client briefs and designing our way out of client problems, that we tend to probably neglect ourselves and not necessarily design our way out of the brief of our own life, or design to the brief of our own lives. And so, yeah, you've really made me think about that, and to actually start paying more attention to our own lives and our own brief, and how do we give ourselves that same kind of attention as we would our clients.
I think we're really good at, as creative people, dealing with other people's problems, finding extrinsic motivation, objectives to do. And then when it comes to ourselves, even writing your own book, it's like, oh my gosh, I don't want to do that. Oh, that can wait. But it's deadlines that are external to us, clients who give us a brief. We will meet that and we will exceed those things. So I always tell creative people, that magic that you do for people, how you see beyond the edges and you can imagine the future and you can design steps towards that future. Use some of that magic on yourself, sprinkle it on you.
Right. I'd love to know how you personally dealt with it. How did you start to reclaim some of your life back? You obviously had the studio, you had Blind, and you're executing on your idea and introducing this whole other thing into your life. And there's great responsibility with something that you already have going on. And now you're going down this path with this new endeavor. So how did you actually deal with that at the time?
Okay. My case is quite unique because the studio, Blind, was running itself for quite a number of years already. There's systems in place. My creative directors would pitch and bid on new projects and they would run them really well. And so the amount of interaction or engagement that I needed to have, or I was obligated to do, was very small. My general thing with my creative teams was, I'm always here to help you, but I'm never going to check in on you. So if you feel like you're stuck, I want you to come find me. It's never an obligation. You don't need to show me anything because I've hired you. I picked the best. You are the best. I trust you, and do what you need. And usually they only call me into projects where they feel like they're not going to win, or they can't get past a certain hurdle and they want to bring in the big guns, and then I would just go in. That left me a lot of free time to think, to read, to learn, to observe, and to process everything. And that's something that I have to say because a lot of people just aren't afforded that time. And this is really important. So while Blind is running, I say to the team, I'm interested in creating content. I'm going to build this other thing. I'm going to disappear for a while. Like physically, I'm in the building, but I'm going to do these other things. You're all welcome to join me. I'm not saying I don't love you anymore, but I'm going to work on this other thing. In case this other thing works, I want to have a lifeboat that if the main vessel should hit an obstacle, we have options. So I asked them very transparently, I said, run this the best that you can. My only criteria is please don't lose money. If we make money, that's awesome. But if we break even, then that's great because I need time to build this other vessel. And this is important. And so there was a period, I think about 2 years, where there was a sliding scale when first it was 100% Blind and 100% the future. And then slowly the team from Blind started to join the future. And then we said in December of 2018, I think we're done doing service work. This can support it. This can support everybody who's here who wants to be part of this content team. Now, a lot of people who grew up in commercial production in the agency world thought, that's too weird. I don't want to do that. I'm going to stay doing commercial stuff. So they went and found different jobs, and it was a very smooth transition because I gave everybody time to adapt and adjust to the new reality.
Yeah, but don't you think in practice, that's actually something that's really difficult to achieve? I've spoken about it a little bit with regards to the personal project and the fact that I believe it's something that comes to haunt all of us, whether we're creative individuals or creative businesses. Just the idea of spinning up a personal creative project outside of all of the time that we spend during the day, which we've discussed many hours solving client briefs or responding to briefs that didn't come from us. And there's a lot of time and energy that goes into that throughout the day. And then, finding time to create this personal project that, as an individual, it might be something that I'm really interested in, or as a company, maybe the company owner has a desire to use company resources to work on this project, or use the resources to do something for good. Honestly, it's something that I have been thinking a lot about, especially the way that our industry is going now, where I do think it's important to focus on this idea of ownership and to create personal projects or create platforms for ourselves that we actually own. But it's very, very difficult. And in your case, you were able to do that, and you've achieved it very well. You've had a lot of success. And listening to what you're saying, to be able to execute on that, you had to give your team a lot of trust. And in order to give your team that amount of trust, you had to relinquish a lot of control. And I think that's something that can also be difficult for people to do when you have a specific way of doing something. To be able to trust others and to trust your team members to fulfill that and take your hands off the wheel is actually really admirable. And maybe that's something that, we all need to do, and other people maybe listening to this should, really think about doing as well, is giving up that control so that we can focus on other things to ourselves.
Yeah, when we talked earlier about burnout, autonomy, being self-directed, to have your own control, it's a really important factor of being happy. I'm not sure that there's data that supports this, but I believe it to be true, that if you paid someone a little less money and you gave them a lot more freedom, they would choose that over like, I want to make more money, but have no freedom. Because that sounds like prison to me, right? And I do want to say something, because sometimes people don't understand the nuance of this, is that for about 2 years, Blind, the production company, was subsidizing the cost of running a company that made no money at all, The Futur. So Blind pays for the building. We have space, we have equipment, and it sits there for whenever we're not doing a production. So guess what? Well, I'm making videos, I'm using the stage, and I'm using equipment, and I'm using the resources of the company, because otherwise The Futur wouldn't have happened, because we can't afford to pay for all these things. The rent, electricity, insurance, the equipment that we're using, there's no way we could have done it.
Do you think that if you didn't figure it out and execute on your passion project, The Futur, that you would be happy right now, or that you would be fulfilled?
I would, but it'd be a different kind of happiness, and the fulfillment would be a little bit different. And one of the things is, if commercial production remained the way it was in the early to mid 2000s, maybe I'd still be doing it, but I can see the writing on the wall. Our consumption habits are different. People are not watching TV the way they used to. The budgets and the creativity that went into making commercials was starting to disappear. There were more people out in the field trying to compete for the same work. And so we can see all the vectors saying, this isn't good, we should get out of this thing. And here's the weird thing. Last night I was spending some time talking to some former ad people, and they were just telling me it's horrific out there. It really is. There's a couple of really big brands, and then there's all of us fighting for the rest, and it's just really tough. And so when you see a trend line, you don't need to wait for it to materialize. I can kind of safely predict where it's going to go. So if I were to still be in design service space, I would probably be a really small company, 2 or 3 people, a tiny little office. Maybe I don't need an office. Maybe I just work with everyone remotely, and I do projects here and there. And maybe that's fulfilling, but I keep asking myself, if I have enough money, which at the time I did, and these projects weren't going to change my life and light my soul on fire, why am I doing this? So then the only alternative there, if I'm not to work, then I would just retire. But I'm not a retiring kind of guy.
I don't think creative people retire, Chris. At least I don't think I will. I'll probably end up going traveling and then want to start painting, or have some random creative idea that comes into my head that I want to start executing on. Probably never ever finish it in old age. But yeah, I don't think we kind of see an end to the creativity. And on that topic, I've kind of been thinking about identity and how identity is wrapped into like our creative practice, and more specifically thinking about this, do what you love narrative, and wondering if it's maybe, is there some kind of toxicity coming out of that, where, we could be raising a generation of creatives that are tying their entire identity and self-worth into their creative output. And I'm wondering if, like with the rise of social media over, the last decade or so, into how it exists now, with all of this pressure to, post and be active and constantly being online, have something to show for yourself, have something to post, always like kind of being on present and being on the timeline. Do you feel like, there could be some dangers coming out of this?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I did not grow up in a time with the internet or cell phones, wireless plans, and social media. And I think I think they were just talking about this, like there's new studies to say like our brains are still forming like well after we're 18. So maybe it's into our early 20s that it starts to form. But if you're growing up and you're 5, 6, 7 years old, and your whole identity and self-worth and esteem is tied to some kind of metric on social media, that can be a very harmful state to be in. And we can see this, it's a very challenging time for people who are growing up in this space to figure out who they are. It takes a while to figure this thing out. It's hard enough to do it when you mess up in front of your school friends or in your junior high or high school. Now you're kind of messing up for the world to see and laugh at you. And that can be a really tough place. And I think it's a bigger obligation for parents to help their children find out who they are, probably before they start putting everything out on social, because that's a pretty hollow measure. But another way of looking at this is we encourage people to keep journals so that you can reflect on your life experience and you can put words to thoughts. Okay, that's cool. And if we just look at social media as a form of public journaling, this is for me. I'm doing it as a form of self-expression versus validation seeking. I think that's a much healthier perspective, but I know that it's easy to say and hard to do.
Yeah, definitely. And I think now it's that fine line between creating something that we enjoy or that we find purpose in versus creating something that we think will perform well on the timeline. You know, there's that added pressure now to, monetize something or to sell something versus making something that will sort of align with our morals, align with our values, and that feels very self-directed. And so I'd love to find out and sort of get your opinion on how you feel we can strive a good balance between the two.
If you can look at content creation or your ability to express your ideas, your thinking, your creativity as a really long game, perhaps the infinite game, and you play it on a timeline that isn't measured in likes, comments, and shares, and is measured across not days, months, but years, that's a much healthier way to look at this. And I think there's a concept here, or maybe a frame to look at it, which is in any one moment, sliver in time, it could be a disaster or the greatest victory. But it's not until you zoom all the way out and you give it some context, what's happened before and after, that then you can really see it for what it is. I think that's the beauty of flight or looking from a perch really high up. It gives you literally a different perspective and you get a sense of scale and magnitude. So that little problem, that little fight that happened down there, it's just a tiny little dot to your eyes at this point. That's why I think when you go up really high in a building, you look down, it feels peaceful and it feels serene because you're literally amongst the clouds at this point. But because all the noise and the tension that exists down at street level have disappeared. You can't even hear it or see it at this point. It just blurs together. So I think some of us zoom in so tightly, especially when you're younger, because teenagers tend to do this. Everything is life and death for them. Oh, somebody didn't ask them to the dance. Oh, my life is over. Or I didn't do well on that test. Oh, what a tragedy. Well, not really, because in a month, 2 months, in a year from now, you won't even recall this moment. That's the thing. So I think if we're playing a much longer game, it gives us a healthier perspective and it allows us to explore without the need for it to be more than what it is. I'm just playing.
Yeah. I always wanted to go into space, zoom out and look back on Earth and really get some perspective. Like when you're in a plane and you're flying 30,000 feet or whatever it is, and you've got all these things going on in your head and whatever problems you might be dealing with. And then you look down on Earth and you see all the houses and the cars and the sheer vast land that we all live on. And it starts to make your problems sort of seem a little bit smaller in the grand scheme of everything and everybody else's. Just seeing it from that perspective. And I remember, I think it was in the Griffith Observatory, there was this plaque on the wall. And I think it was an astronaut that was saying it, that if they could grant humanity one wish, it would be for them to go into outer space and look back on our planet and to get some perspective and to maybe truly find some meaning of why we're actually here.
Are you a fan of the TV series Foundation, Isaac Asimov's work?
Yeah.
They had that sky bridge that brought people from Earth to the station. That would be the dream. Not the blowing up part, but the part where you get to go up and really look at the vastness of space. I see physicists, astrophysicists who are like, with this new telescope or satellite image, we can see what we thought was just darkness. We're like an infinite number of new galaxies just in like one speck of darkness. So when we point that to the rest of the universe, it's incredible how insignificant everything is.
Yeah, exactly. And to be honest, along with our existence too. And I think there's something very human to believe that there is more out there. But, when you're confronted with your day to day and you're thinking about yourself and the ego sort of steps in, when something happens to you or something goes wrong, there's like this sort of finality, right? Or, it's the end, it's over when something goes wrong.
Yeah. I'd like to plant a seed, a suggestion perhaps for whoever's listening to this or watching this later, that you fund a project for Simon, maybe it's through Apple, who knows, where you send this man to outer space. And he produces the most epic film you've ever seen in 8K with a gazillion cameras, and he's actually able to create this feeling, the sensation for us. So it's probably not probable or cost effective for all of us to go to space to that level. But if some of us could do it and capture it and recreate that with all the artistry that you can bring to it, that would be pretty magical, I think. So that's my vote for you to do it.
Yeah, well, thankfully, space is on the agenda again now. Well, depending on how you look at it, if you think that's a good thing or not. But yeah, maybe in our lifetime, we'll be able to pay a visit and go up there and get some more perspective on our lives. I think that would be nice. I'd definitely sign up to that. But yeah, switching topics a little bit. I have a friend who I do consider a mentor. Well, I have many. But yeah, he had a huge impact on my life, especially when I left Prologue and was thinking about what my career path was going to be. And he spent best part of his career, maybe it was 10, 15 years or so, in the VFX industry. He was a VFX artist and then left and had an opportunity with two partners of his, and he's going to know I'm talking about him now, to start another company in a similar field, but more in emerging technology. And what came with that is, they needed to have investors because to achieve what they were trying to do, it did take a lot of capital. So they went down that route. And out of the three partners, one of them had to decide who was actually going to assume more of the business role. And so he decided to do that. And, I think in hindsight, probably thought that is a really good thing to do because you learn more about, as we're always talking about, it's important to know the business side of the creative too. And then there was this standout conversation he had with me where, after choosing to assume that role, he had a conversation with his investors and they were just telling him honestly about, responsibility. And they were saying, look, you're going to have yourself, you're going to have your partner, if you have one, your family, you're going to have your employees, and you're going to have us. And at any given time, you're not going to be able to, give us all of your attention. You're not going to give your family all of the attention. So at any given time, someone's going to be, like, in their words, like upset with you, right? And so, it really made me think about this kind of idea of compromise, right? And they actually said to him, if we feel like you're servicing us and giving us all of your time, we're probably not going to be okay with that, because that means like, well, what's happening with your employees, the company? Like, you have to make sure that you have some kind of balance with your family, right? And so we're getting back into this sort of balance topic again. And so just my sort of question for you is like, how do you deal with balance and compromise in your life, right? Like you have, your business and your family and the kids and everything else. How do you deal with compromise?
Yeah, for me, compromises are really stressful. It's like when you're trying to be at two places at the same time, I find that that's usually where I'm the most stressed. So for example, if I'm leaving a place and I'm stuck in traffic and I need to be somewhere to meet somebody important, that's some of the worst stress. And I think that's like the source of a lot of road rage, because I need to be somewhere else. I cannot be here right now. or like I'm rushing back because I have a podcast or a media thing to do and everyone's waiting for me. And whoever's in front of me, like, please make a turn, go straight, do something, but just don't sit there and think about it too long, please. I'm trying to get through that. And I think there's probably something slightly defective with the way I think, because I would like to live a life with as few compromises as possible, to be uncompromising and not to be seen as a total bastard for that. And this can be tough. It can wear on the people that are around you, right? And I think there are some social compromises that are very important to get along. So for example, what movie do we all want to see? That's a compromise, right? What activity do we want to do? Where do we want to eat? Those are social compromises. But when it comes to the design of my life and how I find fulfillment, I would like not to compromise. Your friend, your mentor, had done something inadvertently in seeking investment. He added an extra master to serve, right? So I think our purpose on this planet should be to have only one master, myself, to be accountable to myself, and to live to those standards of yourself. So when you have a team that you're managing, you in a way, they're your master, because we're servant leaders. We're trying to serve the team, because without the team, we're nothing. And then without clients, well, team, I can't even afford to pay you. I need clients. So now we have two masters, and that's caught between a rock and a hard place already. Then we invite to our world a third master, which is investors who want to see a return on investment, and you want to be prudent and fiscally responsible because your good name is on the line here. Now we have this triangle, and I just can't even process that, because I'm going to do what I do with no investment. I would rather suffer, go slower, and to have to do more myself than to take on venture capital. And here's the weird thing, Simon. As the future, we have people knocking on our door on a routine basis saying, we would like to invest in you. We'd like to buy you. We want to help you do X, Y, and Z. I'm like, no, I just want to have one master, because I'm difficult enough to please as it is. In terms of what I want, I just don't want to invite more. So we should strive for a master of one.
And to become a master of one, that means being of service to yourself, your goals, your interests, your emotions, how you want to do things. But having a business or a company with lots of people makes that complicated, because you care, right? So you have many people, many personalities around you. And as you said, you can start to become like a servant for other people, right? You have 40, 50 people around you. You might very quickly fall into that category of servicing everybody else and kind of leaving yourself on the sidelines. So going back to becoming that sort of master of one, that Jedi, I'm the master of, my destiny and my emotions and, my goals and what I want to do. I just think, it adds layers of complexity around that when you do actually take pride and care about other people. So how have you managed to distance yourself in all of this?
Years ago, when I was working with my business coach, he said something to me. Now, in order for this thing I'm about to tell you make sense, I have to tell you a little bit about my personality. I'm a middle child. And so I've had people-pleasing tendencies, a caretaker personality, which I didn't know I even had until I worked with my therapist. And she goes, the reason why sometimes you're acting passive-aggressively is because when people understand and get a sense of your energy, they'll move aggressively, and you will not stand up to them. You'll let them do things, but then you'll resent them afterwards. And I'm like, you're so right. This has been a problem I've been struggling with for a long time. So to know this part, that's part one. Part two is when there were a couple ideas, one was from my executive producer, maybe from the sales reps, and then from my creative directors. They're all like, we should do this. And they're not all aligning with what I think we should be doing. The old me would compromise and say, okay, executive producer, let's try taking on that client that's not going to pay us. Okay, sales rep, why don't you take extra percentages from this job because you say you need it? And okay, creative directors, go ahead and run this project so that it's not going to be profitable because you think it's really important for us, right? And I kept doing that, and that was a problem for a lot of different reasons, because most of the times they were wrong and they're going to run the company into the ground. So when Kier heard about this, he was talking to me. He said, Chris, here's the thing. As the person who writes the check, who goes to bed every night thinking about every person that you're responsible for, you have the first right to be wrong. You have the right to be wrong first. So if we all don't know what the future is going to be, and no one can say that with certainty, instead of letting the executive producer or the salesperson be wrong first, or the creative director to be wrong first, you should say, hey, everybody, we all have different ideas. I need to do this one thing. And I have to keep reminding myself of this. And when I don't listen to this, we have lots of problems. The reason being is not because they're not good people. It's just because they don't have the perspective that you have. They're thinking about their own little fiefdom, and they're just looking at, oh, well, I care about just looking the best. Or I care about being able to move into certain markets or being paid more because that's what's important to me. Or I need to build this relationship because I'm not sure if I'm going to be here forever. So they all have different agendas. You're the only person who has the agenda of everyone. I need to keep the sales rep happy. I need to make sure the executive producer has strong relationships. I need to make sure the creative directors have good, juicy creative projects to work on. And I have this other dimension that we're still going to be here tomorrow because I've made good financial decisions. And that's how you start to pull yourself out so that you can cut the strings of saying, well, I feel a sense of duty and obligation to do right by everyone, so I'm going to keep compromising. Back to that word. And I've found that in years in which I've allowed people to run the company, inevitably it starts to go sideways. Every single time without failure. I hope this last time is going to be the last time, Simon. We'll see.
We'll see. Seems to be going well though. But to do that, you do need to have a lot of forgiveness for yourself, right? Like to take that responsibility of being the one who is wrong first.
If a team member did a project and it ran into the ground, I'm like, I'm not going to explode on you. It's like we kind of knew this was not going to be a money-making job. I didn't realize to the extent of which we're spending money on it. And we treat people with grace and kindness. We say, let's chalk it up as a learning experience. Let's not do that again. But what happens is when it's our turn to make the mistake, we're horrible in terms of being kind to ourselves. So if we just showed the same kindness to others, to ourselves, I think we would be just fine.
Did it take you a long time to develop that trust? Like to be able to step away from everything and have other people in the driver's seat? Because I don't know, thinking about the creative process, it's really difficult to be able to relinquish that creative control at various points in the process. So I'm just wondering how that was for you.
This is going to sound like an oxymoron, but I think I'm the hardest working lazy person I know. Because I work really hard, but I don't want to be doing all the work myself. So from the very beginning, when I'm running my company, even though we're only a couple of people, I'm like, I'm going to do this thing. I think I figured this thing out, and I'd like to teach you how to do this thing, kind of like the way I do it. Then there's the teacher in you that comes alive. And then you see like, wow, okay, you're about 70% of what I can do. Let me coach you up to the last 30%. And sometimes they can't get to 100, and that's okay. They can get to 90, and then I'll do my little bit. And then that's the promise I make to my clients, that it'll meet or exceed your standards, but it's at least going to meet my standards. And we do that after a while. And eventually you start to say, you know what? Is it all the decisions I would have made? No. But if I want to be the only person working on this forever and not allow people to grow and explore their ideas, then I have to let go. And I'm okay with letting go because I like the alternative much better, which is a happy company culture where people feel they can be self-directed and they have a lot of autonomy to create cool things, and they're growing and they're learning, and we're still making money and clients are happy, and I'm good with that. So I've not had that same challenge that some founder creative directors have, where they have to be in it because their identity is so tied to the work that if the work isn't exactly to their standards, they're like, well, this isn't going to be good enough. And that can drive everybody crazy.
Yeah, definitely. I think that relates to that topic of identity, right? Like the kind of potential danger of tying your creativity fully into your own identity, right? I don't know if you feel the same way, but you could be taking a walk or going to the gym or taking a shower, and there's just like these constant ideas just flowing into your mind, whether it's your own personal creative thoughts or problem solving, like we were saying before, for clients or other briefs, at work. And so there's it could be kind of damaging or dangerous to, tie all of that and collapse that into one identity.
Yeah. I think people use this word a lot, like co-creation, collaboration, and they don't really understand what that means. Because for me, if I'm working with somebody and they do something I could not have seen, and I might not even be like, that would be my first choice. Well, that's called collaboration. It's supposed to be different than what either of you would have created. And in theory, it's a hybrid and it's better, right? But if it's like, I have a singular vision, then I'm not collaborating with you. You're just production for me at this point. Until you hit that thing that's in my head, I'm going to keep asking for more. Doesn't feel right for me.
Yeah, and if you look at it on maybe a slightly smaller scale, it's kind of like being on a project, right? Like if you're the creative director on a job, it's somewhat your responsibility to be able to work with the team and know how to fold in the ideas of others and know how to take input from other people that might shape and, craft and even potentially change the direction somewhat of the project that your team is working on. And that's a skill that you have to learn, over time. It comes easier for others. Sometimes it's really difficult. You can't be this creative dictator on the job if you're working from or overseeing from that kind of altitude. So it's definitely something that we all have to learn at some point in our career if we decide to go that way. Kind of speaking of, we can't have a conversation without acknowledging the fact that our industry is evolving extremely fast. You have to be paying attention daily or weekly. There's new tools coming out. You're seeing posts from various companies on all of these developments, and hopefully, everyone is playing with these things and, starting to understand how you might be able to improve our own personal or creative workflows, right? And then it sort of coming into this conversation, it made me think about your mission for the future, to be able to, teach 1 billion people how to make a living doing something that they love. And it just makes me wonder, how is that making you sort of change your perspective on your overall vision now that the industry's changed so much from when you started The Future, or definitely when you started Blind?
You asked that question without even saying the word, and I know the word. Everybody knows what you're saying, but I'm going to say it. I believe you're talking about AI.
Yes, I am.
Yes. Okay, we said it there. Everybody, just relax. Don't drive off the road.
I'm trying not to light the fire immediately.
Yeah. Here we go, right? All right. I think if we think of ourselves as people who execute ideas, we're in deep trouble. I want you to let that sink in. If you are threatened because a tool can do what you can do in less time for less money, we are in deep trouble. The best example I can say is rotoscoping. Rotoscoping is a necessary thing where we're cutting out images, and it's a very labor intensive thing. And there's almost like a binary result. Like, it's a good mat, it's not a good mat. There's not like it's a creative mat, it's a mat.
Yeah, it works or it doesn't.
Yes, basically the hair's all weird, or there's a weird flickering thing, and then it doesn't work. And this was work relegated to very specialized individuals to do this. Is this a job we want for humans? I don't think so. Now, most of us in the creative space were like, yeah, no, nobody should have to do that. Software should do that. They should invent really good tools to do that. And we can see that because we're in a different side of that equation. But what if that rotoscope line moved right up to where you are right now? Where the making of frames or building 3D models or texture mapping and lighting, or even holding a camera, capturing something, that the machine can do that. Now, my business coach here used to say this all the time. And he would kind of laugh a little bit when he said it. It's like, oh, you think you're in the creative space. No, you're in production. That's why they're called production companies. That's why it's called post-production. It's like we don't even want to see the label. We're in production. It's fancy production. It requires a lot of talent, but it's still production. So if we change the frame to like what you do as the person who generates the ideas, the thinking, or the strategy, that's where it gets really interesting now. So I don't know too many people who graduate from school who say to themselves, I'd love just to be in middle management all my life. I would love to just be a production artist all my life. What do they all say, Simon? You notice, when can I become an art director?
Yeah, that's always the aspiration.
100%, without fail. And if they don't want that, then they're not ambitious enough to be in this space, right? Well, what does an art director do? An art director speaks to creative teams, has a vision in their mind, and helps to guide them to achieve said vision. And they're also the conduit between a brief and the creative teams. That's what an art director does. I think the audience already knows where I'm going with this. If you were to just change some of the variables here and say, if you can speak to a team of agents, robots, AI, and ask it to do the things that you want, generate this frame, come up with different slogans, build a 3D model for me, light it this way, edit it this way, then you are left with the purity of just thinking about what it is you want. So I think now we're living in the age of people who have taste. This is very elusive because it's hard for people to develop taste. It's not so easy to learn how to have good taste. And this joke we always say, maybe to make ourselves feel better, you can be rich, but you got no taste. You have no style. Right? Some of the richest people we know walk into the room and be like, oh my God, what a mess. I know you bought that car because everybody buys that car. It's not because you know that it's good or you can appreciate the real beauty of it. And you wear that watch because that's what everybody buys to say that they've made it and that it's a thing of beauty, but you can't really recognize why. You're just doing what people in your space do to show others that they're successful. Right? So I think we're living in this age now where people have strong literary backgrounds who can articulate complicated and nuanced ideas with words. People who write treatments for main titles or shows are going to be very powerful. People who have a strong sense of history, art history, music, philosophy, architecture, fashion, photography, can call upon these references with exacting detail to ask the agents, it's between this and this, but more like that. And the last ones who, when the machine kicks out all the work, can sit back and say, that's actually not good. Do it again and again. There. That's what the world wants. This is what the project needs. So I think, why are we in this place where we're going to bring ourselves to the frame of production where we can easily be in the world of direction and to be the visionary that you're meant to be?
Yeah, I strongly agree with that, because when I look at my own career, or even before that, my education, ideas have always been central to my creative process. And I would go as far to say essential, because I actually think that it saved me in a lot of cases, especially coming out here, starting at Prologue and being surrounded by so many people who were way more technically proficient than I was. I found myself leaning into and relying on my capabilities of conceptualizing, right? And then going back to my education, it being a necessity to have multiple sketchbooks when we're doing a project, right? So you'd have 3 or 4 different sketchbooks filled with ideas and filled with references that supported your final piece, like the final output, whatever you're putting on the wall or whatever you're playing on the monitor, right? If it's a piece of motion. But you had to have that sketchbook of ideas. And then if you now relate that to your mind and where we are now, I think it's even more important to think about our mind as that sketchbook and filling it with maybe it's art history, it's our knowledge of photography, of film, of painting, whatever it might be, to not forget about that part of the process of researching and understanding, around the subject matter of the project that we might be working on, and even beyond that. So as much as we can, I think we should be willing to spend a lot of time in knowledge acquisition and essentially, I think, forming our own high level of taste, which should be able to then help us navigate and drive through this transition.
Mm-hmm. I saw a post on Instagram earlier this morning about how technical prompting is over. Now it's like really artistic prompting, where people are talking about skin tones and certain kinds of lighting, and the prompt is as poetic as something that you would write for a piece of literature, but it just happens to be a thing that is sent to a machine to build for you. And the images that they showed from that were just stunning. It's like, wow. So every time I'm like, I'm pretty good at this. No, there's levels to this game, and it's evolving pretty quickly.
Yeah, and honestly, I think it's really important to keep experimenting and exploring and finding ways in which to expedite or find efficiencies in your own creative process, But Chris, how are you having, or what kind of dialogue are you having with your kids? I'm sure they're quite grown by now, but just thinking about the younger generation and the dialogue that, we're having together, there's multiple generations being impacted by this. I'd love to know, what sort of conversations you're having with your kids and your family.
Yeah, so I have 2 adult boys now. One is 20, what is he? He's 21 and 19. That's how old the boys are. They're both in college. So one is studying philosophy and writing. He's using Claude and he's using GPT. And the reason why I know this is because he shares my account. I can see all the kinds of research he's doing. So I think he understands that he's integrated into his life. And he also understands that you don't use the machine to do your thinking for you. You're using it in creative ways. And I think he's going to be just fine. My youngest, he is studying entertainment design at Art Center. So they're learning those hand skills. And I keep telling him, how are you using AI right now? Because I'm concerned for you. Because the field he's entering into will be to do concept art, to draw spaceships and build worlds and things like that. When I can say, well, why don't you start and I'll be done before you even lay down your first base color, right? But I think it's important for him to learn the rules of perspective design and lighting so that when he goes to prompt, he can have that style or ability to curate and say, that's not right, something's off. And to be able to tell it, this is off, please fix this. And I wish for him, he would have used more AI-generated art to inform different directions before he pursued one. So it's not that different than how in your school you were told, I want to see a notebook full of ideas, references, notes, things that you're thinking about before you finish your thing. Now we know this. To build something that looks really finished and polished takes a lot of energy. So we tend to go on a singular path, and it's hard for us to jump that rail or just go off the rails because it's so much energy into that. So I think before we actually put any serious work into anything, we should explore what's possible and to be surprised and to collaborate with the machine so that we're like, oh, that is definitely the one I want to build. And now use that as a foundation or a springboard and then do your creative work. Because otherwise you're going to be replaced.
And so on that point, what would you say the future of education is going to look like?
Ooh, okay. I think there's a couple things. Standardized testing will go away because standardized testing was made because it's the most efficient way to judge whether or not you know the material. But if teachers made an agent or a bot to then ask questions and have dialogue, which is really how we need to know if somebody understands something, then that can all go away. So your tests in the future would be like, demonstrate what you know, let's have a conversation, and you're talking to a machine that then will score you on whatever matrix rubric that the instructor has in order to determine if you should move on to the next level or you need to do more work. But I think there's something also that's super amazing is that you could have a 24/7 TA help you. I don't know how your education was. Like for me, there was class, and sometimes I didn't understand the concepts, felt embarrassed to like, hey, I know everybody gets it, but I don't. Then you would go home and you would grind on it, feel stupid. And then if you had a parent around, you're like, Dad, Mom, I don't know how to do this. Can you help me? And they're doing the homework with you. But I think now, whatever you're learning, you can have a TA be there to teach you, to be infinitely patient, never yells at you, never loses its temper, knows the material inside and out, finds different teaching modalities that's paired up with the way that you learn. So if you're a visual learner, maybe it's using metaphors and images to help you go through it. Maybe if you're a better listener, it just talks to you, uses words instead of images, or it's a combination of both or something different.
Yeah, I honestly can't wait to see how this all pans out. I mean, we've been in this for quite a while. You've been in the game longer than I have. But I think we've both seen our fair share of technological advancement. Nothing quite like this, of course, admittedly. But, we've seen evolutions in the power of GPUs or new software capabilities, new versions of Photoshop, Maya, Cinema 4D, introduction of Blender and ZBrush or whatever it might be. Just what I'm saying is there's been an abundance of tools and advancement in tools to get the job done. But take GPUs, for example. You get a more powerful GPU, you can now render more. So maybe what you were rendering last year can be achieved in a much shorter time. But we're not looking to last year, we're looking to now and the future. And so I think the expectation of fidelity always rises with the technology. In fact, I know that we've seen that, right? So your renders don't necessarily it's not necessarily faster to render anymore. You're just sort of catching up, like the machine or the power of the GPU is catching up with the expectation of the fidelity. And so I can't help but think with where we are now with AI and all of the efficiencies that we're going to be able to create, do you think that it's gonna, like, the expectation is gonna keep going up? Or, we hear this narrative around, oh, everyone's gonna have all of this spare time. We're gonna have a lot more spare time to just do, I don't know, whatever it might be, but obviously not doing the job. But I don't know. I just can't help but think maybe that may not be the case. And we might actually just keep having more work to do. I mean, what's your take on that?
I think the stakes keep going up and the expectations keep rising. But luckily, the tools and our work process always seem to meet us there. I don't know if you were in design and production back in standard definition.
Yeah, just on that transition. I think I was like a year in when we were transitioning from SD to HD.
Oh, you were? Okay. It was pretty rough. Like now we're dealing with frames that are 4 times the size. Just when we thought the machines could catch up and we're working at a good clip now we're dealing with 4 times the bandwidth of pixels to push around. And it's like, oh, it's slow again. Oh my gosh. Right. And then they're talking about 8K or whatever. It's like, thank God we're not there yet. We're in HD right now. We're still working this way. And I imagine part of your responsibilities at Prologue were to paint frames.
Yes, every day.
Okay. Let's talk about that process. We're going to get a little nerdy here, everybody. So there's sourcing of images, spending a lot of time on Google, finding crappy images, maybe building things off stock, building 3D models, or going out and taking your own photos. That's a lot of time in just pre-production before you can actually put things on screen. We're not even talking about the time it takes you to think about the idea, reading and researching and just letting your imagination go free and wild, right? Okay, now you're going to sit there and you're going to just mash this together in Photoshop. Cutting things out is the next task. I'm like, oh my gosh. And then relighting so that they all live in the same space. Shadows, reflections, comping in cloud, smoke, filter, particles, whatever. Now you have this frame. And clients or Kyle's like, let's change the angle. You're like, it doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. And he goes, but you can do it. He doesn't really care. The clients don't really care. And then you're like, but you do it because you're like, they're right. That's not the right angle, son of a, okay, fine. Okay, we're talking about days worth of work now. Okay, and then you land on that frame, you're like, that's a good frame. We can sell that frame. That captures the idea. Maybe it's for a big movie studio logo, animated logo or something. Perfect. We'll now go make 8 more frames because they can't live on a frame. They need to see the story unfold. You're like, that was a lot of work to get there. Where are we now? Where we are now is you can spend 90% of your time thinking, dreaming, and just 10% prompting. And then maybe not 10%, like 6% prompting and 4% retouching. But the retouching is going to shrink because you're going to get closer and closer to exactly what you asked for. I remember in the early days of Midjourney, I'm like, oh, okay, this is good enough. I'm going to go into Photoshop. I'll fix the rest. And now with generative expand, gen fill, you circle something and then it just corrects all the textures, the gradients line up. Things that were just very difficult to do and very time consuming are now just like that. You could do it.
Yeah, it's the tedious tasks.
Yeah. Yeah. Or like, hey, I want to change lighting to this. I think that's a creative task, but the production, the doing of that is very tedious, right? So clients are going to come to us, or we're going to come to ourselves like, well, I'm going to still work really hard on this. But here's where I think maybe I want to add a perspective to this. I'm not going to make more versions. I'm just going to spend more time thinking about the thing that I want to make. I'm going to try things, but at the end of the day, I'm still going to give you the 3 frames that I mentioned.
Yeah, and you'll be able to get there quicker or to a version that you like because the labor has been taken out of the equation.
The labor part is going to shrink, but the thinking part can expand, which is where we want to be.
Yeah, exactly. And, all speculation aside, I do hope that we do gain some time back, right? If you're not rotoscoping for 4-6 hours, be able to use that time for something that we enjoy, go for a walk, or just, I think most importantly, get some more time back to innovate.
I think we're already there. I know you work in a very demanding space. And I recall I just finished these frames and we're good, but I'm already stacked with more things to do. So I don't have time to sit there and read and research and kind of watch a film to kind of like think about what I want to say. I'm already producing things because the train keeps moving. And to the point that you brought up earlier, if you don't have a strong idea, you better have really strong execution. And we know that sometimes ideas, they're not like predictable. You can't always come in with something like, yeah, I did it. It was great. But we know if we labor on frames, they will look better the more time we work on them. So we get caught up in that cycle. So the first project, I did a lot of thinking. I did a lot of design. It's done. But then the next project comes and the next project comes and there's no time in between. So now we're just executing, putting that polish on those pixels. And then we find ourselves in this place of total burnout where we don't even like what we're making. That's what we're talking about, burnout. So I think whether you go for a walk, whatever, if the production part of it doesn't take as long as it used to, and it won't, I have time to think, even with the next wave of project coming in. And this is how I work now. I'm not working on storyboards or main title sequences or anything like that, but I do keynotes, I do talks. And I spend 90% of my time thinking and writing, Simon. So behind me, you see all those cards there? That's how the talk begins. And I was telling my friend Rodrigo, I wish you were here with me in the middle of the night when I'm assembling the ideas and doing a paper edit, moving things around. Like, yeah, that makes sense. Then the next few hours, I'm just building the keynote.
Yeah, it's the practical or physical component of the work, right? Like having the time to write on the Post-it note and actually just having the time to think. I feel like, there's so often that we're always in reactive mode. We're reacting, responding, reacting, and you're not necessarily having that quality time to think.
Right. I have a real world story I want to share real quickly here. There's a buddy of mine, he's running a big event and they're using a vendor to do AI generated video. And they're doing this kind of post-apocalyptic world, right? Somewhere between like Blade Runner, The Matrix or whatever. And they're off making these text to video things. And he shows it to me and I'm like, there's a lot of technical problems, but the biggest problem is, what is the narrative arc? He goes, what do you mean? I said, well, there's no tension. Why are we seeing this shot? What's happening here? He goes, oh, this is not his field of expertise. So he was just kind of like, something's not right, Chris. What are we supposed to do? And then I told him the opening shot should be this. And then it leads here. And you need to give the character motivation to do this, this, and that. And then these are the kind of shots you want to insert in between. He goes, wow. And he says it's tongue in cheek. It's almost like you've done this before. Right? So we can have technicians still produce things that will look really shiny to a lot of people. But we get back to the concept, the thinking part. And he goes, it made a big difference. So he took those notes, went back to the AI team, said, hey, these shots need to do this. And what he got back wasn't perfect, but it was 1,000 times better than just a bunch of random shots that kind of look cool.
Yeah, it's important. And, I've been looking at the whole creative process and kind of dividing it into these three parts. So in the beginning, I strongly believe that's where we should have a lot of human creative input in the development process, right? Having a lot of control over, what the final creative output at least should be, right? And of course, at this early stage, we can brainstorm with the machines and, maybe speed up some of that. But I really think it's important to have that human stamp on the beginning, right? And then you get into more of the, let's say, execution phase in the middle. Maybe some more of the laborious, tedious tasks. Maybe we can lean back a little bit and, have the machines take care of that part, right? So maybe we can have more time even at the front end to ideate and come up with concepts if we know that middle part of the process is going to be a little shorter, I should say. And then coming in at the back end, the QC phase, like, does everything make sense? Are there hallucinations, right? Putting our final stamp on at the back end. Is the narrative correct, right? Does the story make sense? What is the final touches on it? So I think if we look at the process in those three sort of sections, we could start to maybe define where it might be a good idea to lean in and lean out.
We know this because the Marvel movies and TV shows that came out in the last couple of years have been pretty garbage. As much as I'm a diehard comic book fan, they're terrible. And they threw hundreds of millions of dollars at this. So even when we have humans building things and lots of resources, you can still make a hot mess.
Yeah, and almost with unlimited resources and budget too. Yeah. But Chris, I was going to ask you, has there ever been a time when you've experienced extreme burnout yourself, where you've felt the need to actually take some extended time out and step away, just for your mental health? Maybe you've been caught in a burnout cycle yourself. But before that, I'd actually like to understand how you would approach it. Like if there's anyone listening that might be experiencing a burnout cycle themselves or stuck in some kind of heavy creative rut, is there any mindset that you would recommend that somebody adopts in this kind of scenario?
Yeah. I won't repeat what we talked about before about the potential factors leading to a burnout. So I'll add something different here. I have friends who are very athletic, physically fit, and I wasn't for a period of time. And they would always tell me, Chris, yeah, you need to like take better care of yourself. I'm like, yeah, whatever. I gotta keep reading. I gotta keep working. I don't have time for that. And they're like, no, you have more energy. You'll feel like there's more vitality in what you do. I just didn't believe them because I thought, how if your friends are into soccer, it's like soccer's the best thing. Or if they're drinking wine, like wines are the best thing. And then I hit some kind of low point in my life where I'm like, I don't want to be absent in my kids' life when they're like little dudes because I'm not physically able, or I have a lot of body shame because I don't want to go to the pool or the beach with them because I don't take my shirt off. It feels so weird. And so now I'm being an absentee father. I hit that low point. I make a promise to myself, tomorrow's a different day. As soon as we get home, I start working out. And I've been working out ever since. I'm not telling you I'm like, Johnny Six-Pack or anything, but I always feel like I'm in the best shape of my life. And people who are much younger than me are like, I need to take a nap. I can't do this. I'm so tired. I'm like, what are you doing? You're like half my age. My son's like that. He's like, Dad, I'm so tired. I'm like, for real, bro? You're 21. Even if you are 19, if you double that, you're still not near me. Maybe you triple it and we're getting close. So how is it you have more energy? So I would just say to some people, you have to take care of the machine because the machine is what takes care of you and the machine is your body. You have to eat right, and eat right means less processed foods, less sugar, less junk, less chemicals. And because food is medicine. And then you take better care of your physical self, you'll find, I have a little bit more energy. And you'll recover from those long nights a little bit faster. And you'll start to feel stronger and more confident. And you'll carry yourself a little bit differently. You won't ache as much. And so I think that's the one, if you can't control the other parts about having control, about progressing or getting paid more, you can take better care of yourself. It's the one thing you have control over, how you ingest energy and how you use energy physically. I would suggest that.
Yeah, from day one, it's always been helpful for me to have that physical component factored into my lifestyle, right? Whether it's for like my mental or my physical, right? My body and my mind. And I honestly don't know, how I would have done without it, to be fair. And, we try to do something, every day or 3 times a week or 4 times a week. And maybe you don't achieve that. You might be, working extra hard for a week, a month, being crunch time or whatever. But so long as you try to have some kind of routine that you can remember to go back to, right? And then you have that muscle memory that, helps you get back into it a lot faster. And I try to look at it as, this concept of deposits, right? You have these creative deposits that we're doing every single day. You have the financial deposits as well. Obviously, hopefully we're being compensated for the work we're doing. And then we have the health deposits. And honestly, without all 3 of those together working, right, in syncopation, I don't know, it's tricky to feel balanced yourself, right? So yeah, that's how I look at things anyway.
Yeah. There's 2 other things that are beneficial for you doing some kind of activity. I'm not even the guy who's like, you must do this. It's just do the best you can in the time you have. That's all. Because if it feels good, you'll do a little bit more. And if it doesn't, you won't. So you got to enjoy the process. Number 1 is by straining yourself, either through vigorously walking or lifting heavy things. I think there's a chemical reaction that happens that you can dump some of the toxic stuff that you need to get rid of. And number 2, probably the thing that really ties back to creativity is there's this state that we enter into that's, I think is described as autonomic. Like when you're washing dishes or the car, you're mowing the lawn, or when you're in the shower, you're doing things through muscle memory that you don't really need to think about. And you enter in this hybrid state between sleep and conscious waking moments. And then you hit that magical spot. That's why people always say, oh, my best ideas come in the shower. Because you're conscious enough to know what you're thinking about, but not so focused on the task that your really super smart brain can work. And so you're making that connection between those two brains that you have. And it's a really awesome thing. So for that reason too, when you're in the gym or you're on a walk, whatever it is that you're doing, you're kind of semi-focused on that thing. You're allowing the archival brain and the thinking brain to work together in harmony to generate ideas for you. So I think that's important.
Yeah. It's like when you're in that flow state, right? And funny enough, that happens a lot of the time when you're not even thinking about anything, or at least anything to do with the current task at hand, right? So you're sort of quiet in your quiet space, you've quietened your mind, and then these ideas start flowing to you. Or sometimes it's when you're pushing through some form of resistance that is not necessarily the project that you're trying to solve the brief for, or whatever it might be. You might be going for a jog or in the gym or some other kind of physical exertion, right? I just think it's kind of funny how that happens. And I believe that, ideas or all the answers are just floating around us. They're already there. And we just have to do our job at finding our own way of tapping into them.
Right. Now, I wanted to answer your burnout thing. I have been burned out. Exactly one time in my life. I know exactly where it was and how it happened and what I had to do to get through it. 5 years into starting Blind, I'd been working nonstop, no vacations, barely went to see my family because at that point my parents lived in Northern California. And so I was just working for 5 years. And 5 years is a long time to not take a break. 5 years is a long time for the evolution of the industry. Things change really quickly. And I found myself in this weird position where 5 years in, the people I hired had better skills than me because now they're trained as first generation motion design artists. So those 3D skills that you're talking about, I don't even know what that is. Like what? How do you know how to do any of this stuff? And so I found myself feeling all of a sudden like an imposter, being intimidated by my own employees, which is really weird, right? Like, man, I don't know anything. You guys know everything. So I got into a real funk, started doubting myself. So I announced to everybody, I'm going to take a 3-month sabbatical. And luckily I had built the company up enough at that point with a war chest and infrastructure in place that it may not make a lot of money, but it won't totally collapse in 3 months. And the timing was really good because prior to that, I think it was Otis who was saying, do you want to teach? I'm like, no, I don't have time for this. But as soon as I decided to go on my sabbatical, they reached out and said, do you want to teach? I'm like, yes, I do want to teach. So the first time I committed to like a semester of teaching was at Otis, and something wonderful happened. This is the best part. I go to class, I'm scared, I'm nervous, kids are looking at me, I don't have answers, and I go through this process, and then eventually I start to figure it out. But the most beautiful part is when a student would ask, how'd you do that? How'd you say this? Why did you critique us this way? Or what's happening in your brain? And that's a gift because now I get the opportunity to go into my own process and explain in words and images to people. And then all of a sudden, I would see their eyes light up. I'm like, so you're saying you didn't know this before? Everybody doesn't know this? And so you have 14 weeks of this. And it's some of the most uplifting, validating thing that you can do is to teach people. Hence that expression, one teaches to learn.
Yeah, it's that reinforcement of knowledge, isn't it? Like for myself, when I'm learning something new, or if I've just read a book and I've, stumbled on something that really interests me, as soon as possible, I try to have a conversation about it or try to, teach somebody what I knew. And that just really helps me through that repetition or hearing it back, or me trying to explain it to somebody else actually helps positively reinforce that information for myself. So yeah, I think that's a valuable technique.
Yeah. There's something that's beautiful because we don't know what we know until we articulate it to people. That's why writing is very important, or speaking. So when you read the book, it's like, it's just soup in your brain. And then you go and tell somebody, and it's not so much for them. You need to tell somebody for you. Do I know this? So when you explain it, you're like, wait, I messed that part up. I need to go back. I need to reread that part. So the demonstration or the teaching of that thing reinforces it. And the brain sciences, I think it moves from short-term memory to long-term memory. So you're doing something there that's very helpful. And that's what I do too. Because I'll watch a video, I'll see a joke, and I need to go tell somebody that joke. I'm like, I want to be able to keep it, not just have it go in and leave. And that's what I have to do. So teaching people made me aware of what I knew, made me aware that what I knew was valuable and it wasn't common to everybody, because I was mostly self-taught as it comes to like sequential design. And it gave me confidence. And then I realized something. I guess it's like, this is a rich tapestry where everything kind of ties together here. I realized my value wasn't in the making of the thing. It was in the thinking of the things, for which I'm pretty good. So what intimidated me about these young designers coming in was they're very good at the making of the things.
It's the thinking. Yeah. It's the concepts. It's the ideas. Yeah.
See? Same story, right? It's the ideas.
Yeah. Well, hopefully that helps us all where we're about to go. But on the topic of looking forward, how do you hope society will start to redefine success?
There's a gentleman, his name is Jason Silva. Do you know who Jason Silva is?
I do not.
I think he hosts a show on National Geographic called Shots of Awe or something like that. And he's a good-looking, pretty brilliant speaker. And I saw him many years ago, like on a TED Talk or something like that, where he goes on stage, no scripts, no slides, stream of consciousness talks for 18 minutes straight, super complex ideas woven together. And he talks about like this flow state thing, but he said something and it stuck with me. He goes something like, we make things and then things make us, right? We design objects, we design cities, and then the cities shape who we are. So we should start thinking about that. That was one of the ideas that I thought was pretty amazing. The other idea he shared was something about, in the future, the new billionaire would not be measured by the amount of money you have in a bank account. It'll be measured by the number of lives you impact positively. And that has stuck with me.
I love that. Hence, 1 billion people.
Have 1 billion people. Help them to make a living doing what they love. And I think it fills me with so much purpose and joy that every time somebody comes up to me and says, hey, you helped me get through a dark spot. You allowed me to move out of my parents' house or save enough money to get married. Maybe I never get to 1 billion. But those 3, I've lived a good life. I can rest on that.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's extremely rewarding to be in a position to be able to say one word or one sentence, or somebody hears something that you've said on your platform, or reads something that you've posted and maybe writes down a paragraph in their sketchbook. And let's just say months down the line, they open that sketchbook again and become inspired by those words, or those words help them get through something they're going through creatively or whatever. And so then, it makes me then reflect on my journey. And I feel very fortunate to have been able to be sort of recognized in London and brought out to LA to have the experience I have. I would still say it's my dream job. After a couple of decades, I'm still enjoying what I'm doing. But then you get to this point where you feel like you need to speak on your journey and not just, put your projects out there and try to, inspire that way, but start to use your voice. And, this kind of brings me to, the final question of this conversation. And I ask this question to everybody that comes on the episode. And that question is, what do you think it takes to be like a creative leader, or in your case, a creative leader and mentor in this space? You obviously have a platform where you're able to reach thousands of people. And so there's a lot of weight there with the reach that you have and the responsibility. What does it mean to you to be a creative leader and mentor in this space?
That's a great question. And people have asked me this question before. And I think if you start to think about the impact that you might have on people, it can be crushing. It really can. The weight of if I say this, then people might feel that, or it's a responsibility that's just too big. And maybe we're going to bookend the conversation here where I think my main job is to be true to me, to serve that one master. And if it helps people, fantastic. If it doesn't, I'm okay with that too. Because when you start thinking about all the other things that you have, it's like spinning plates, and now I have no time to think about what I want to say. And then I don't think I'm serving anybody at that point. Maybe I'm taking care of them, but I'm not really serving them. And I think about this from time to time where somebody will ask me a question that I've not been, I haven't had been asked this before, and then I'll give an answer, and I'll think, how is it I have an answer for that question which I've not heard before? It's because all the rest of my time, I'm consuming, I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm being inspired, and I'm inspiring people, and I'm a growing organism. So at some point, these ideas that I'm able to share with people could be of value to them because I'm doing the work all the time. But if I keep thinking about the responsibility of being mentors to people, then I won't have time to do that. And I've shared this with my friend recently, who I'm really trying to coach up and have him kind of expand his thinking. I said, I want you to think of everything you do as an investment. And be asking yourself, what is the ROI on this? Not in terms of money, but what is the return on your investment of time, energy, love, everything you do? So if you drive here, literally it takes you 2 hours to drive here, what is the return on that investment? Well, I'm going to get to meet these people. I'm going to be in the room where it happens. Well, that's a good investment then, because the ROI on that is fantastic. But if your buddy says, hey, I got to go do this thing. You want to ride shotgun and you go do that thing. You can say, well, that's an investment in the friendship, the relationship, and that's good too. And that's okay too. But I want all of us to think we have finite account. It ends at some point. So just make sure you're making good investments with your time, your energy, your love, your generosity, everything.
It's those deposits and being really conscious of where you show up and how you show up. And perhaps it's another episode really, but that power of saying no and being really careful about where you put your own energy and, to your sentiment, being that sort of master of yourself in a way.
It's not easy.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not. And I'm sure in your position, especially, you're probably bombarded with so many opportunities, and it's all about deciphering what's right for your time, what's right for your energy, and, also what's right for other people. So you can show up in the right way for whatever opportunity might be coming your way so that other people benefit from that too. Yeah. Well, Chris, thank you for all of the time that you've shared today. And I really got a lot out of this conversation, and I knew I would, but I'm leaving here with some other ideas and thoughts on how to navigate this fatigue that I think we all experience at some point in our creative journey. And I also want to just take this time to say a huge thank you for everything that you've done in the design community. There's thousands of people, as you said, that you've impacted in such a positive way. And I always remember, as I said, our conversation in the parking lot all those years ago, and just watching you build, and most importantly, not being fearful, or from my position, not being fearful of putting yourself out there and putting your voice out there and going on camera and being on the other side of the camera. You know, as designers, we're always kind of behind the camera. So this is definitely something new. And you've achieved so much and positively impacted so many lives. So, you know, on behalf of everybody that's, you know, been on your platform, read your words of wisdom, heard your words of wisdom, I just want to say thank you and a huge congratulations.
Thanks, Simon. I really enjoyed our conversation. You pulled us in directions I don't normally get to talk about, so I enjoyed it. Thanks for making this pod, and thanks for creating space for these kinds of conversations to happen.
Thank you. And lastly, where can people find you? You know, those who don't know, I mean, a lot of people probably watching or listening do know, but for those who don't, where can we find you?
People can find me pretty much on every social platform, Instagram, LinkedIn. You just send me a DM. No one else manages it. It's just me. So I'm at the Chris Do, and Do spelled D-O.
Great. And I'll be putting all of this information in the episode description. So Chris, thanks again and have a great one. Till next time. Cheers.